Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Detroit Lions attempted to avoid losing momentum heading into their final battle with the Minnesota Vikings. Also, the Giants win makes sense from a certain point of view, and Penn State is ready to kick off the college football playoff quarterfinal against Boise State.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Detroit Lions pick up a big win over the San Francisco 49ers in week number 17. With me to talk about that, it is Matt Derry, the host of Locked On Lions. And Matt, this Lions team's faced a lot of questions this year about their injury situation, about if that's going to impact them, and it certainly has in a bunch of major ways. But this win for the Lions, was this business as usual for Detroit, or do you think that this was a statement win heading into a big Week 18 matchup?
It's crazy, Kevin. I didn't think in a million years that Dan Campbell would play all of his regulars the entire night tonight and really go for this win. He talked about for weeks and months the San Francisco revenge game and the scene of the crime of the NFC Championship loss last year, but they went through with it, and they played with flying colors in the second half especially. The offense was phenomenal tonight, led by Jared Goff, of course, and Jahmyr Gibbs. The O-line was great. So I loved it. I love the approach. That's kind of the mentality, the identity of this team, that even in a game that was deemed meaningless due to the fact that Minnesota won, they still went out and played football, and that's what they do. And so now, like you said, a big showdown on Sunday, but great performance by the offense, defense, a lot of questions.
And I know that matchup has everything, the one seed on the line, NFC North Division title on the line. But I want to ask you this, Matt. How scared are the Detroit Lions of the Minnesota Vikings? And on the flip side, how scared should the Minnesota Vikings be of the Detroit Lions?
I'm not kidding, Kev. First 1 to 50. I mean, that's what this might look like. The Lions offense is absolutely unstoppable. Gibbs and Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams now coming into his own. Laporta had a big night tonight. That offensive line, all of the things that offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is still doing from a creative standpoint, they can't be stopped. I think it was Bill Belichick weeks ago on the Jim Gray podcast just talking about how there's no way to stop this Lions offense. Meantime, on the other side, like you just said, Minnesota's offense has been so good with Sam Darnold, and the Lions defense right now so banged up. They let San Francisco and Brock Purdy go for 475 tonight in terms of yardage. That has to change, or it's going to be an absolute shootout. And the Lions, the Lions defense, can they hold up against Minnesota? That'll be a big question.
And I know that regardless of if Detroit gets the 1 or if Detroit gets the 5, this is still a team that not a lot of NFC playoff teams want to see when it comes down to it in January. But to you, Matt, with the path changing, whether it's the 1 or it's the 5, does that give you any more or less confidence? Is being the 5 seed something with a different path? Do you say that might be a little bit more difficult for Detroit, or do you still have the confidence that they can go out there and get the job done?
I do have the confidence, Kevin, that the Lions can do this even from that 5 slot. But come on, let's be honest. Troy Aikman talked about it tonight on the broadcast on ESPN. The Lions need a break. They need rest. And if they can get the 1 seed, be at home in that raucous Ford Field, have an opportunity to sit out a week and get some players back. They haven't had a bye since week 5. That's huge for them. To have to go on the road and play Tampa Bay, a team that beat them earlier in the year, could be a big concern in round 1. So, yes, I do believe the Lions' path, it doesn't matter to them. They'll tell you they can win anywhere. And look, they've won every road game this year. They finished the season 8-0 on the road. Pretty darn good. But I think they'll tell you they'd much rather be the 1 seed.
You talked about the offense and obviously just raved about how good they have played and how good they played in this game against San Francisco. But defensively, you mentioned the concerns, and we know the injuries that have gone on the defensive side of the ball. We know that's a big concern point. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your concern level for that defense? Because you were talking about how, hey, 1 to 50 against Minnesota, can they stop teams? Brock Purdy going for what he went for. How big of a concern is that for you heading into the playoffs?
It is a big concern. I think the good news is that Alex Anzalone is coming back. They're going to get some other guys back. But losing Aleem McNeil, losing Aiden Hutchinson has just been too big to overcome, at least the last few weeks. They kind of overcame it early on, and they did okay. but guys like Zadarius Smith, Levi Onwuzurike, DJ Reader that they really need along that defensive line have gotten absolutely murdered the last couple of weeks by first off, the Bears and their bad offensive line. And this week, the Niners pushed them around with all of their backups. That's a concern. I think the secondary's fine. I love the way Kirby Joseph is playing. 2 more interceptions tonight. He's been phenomenal, but they got to clean some things up and fast. It is definitely a concern.
I have to ask you, do the Lions get it done? Do you feel like they can wrap this thing up? Do you think they have enough to stop Minnesota from trying to upset them? And do you think Detroit holds on to the 1 seed?
I do. They just have this team of destiny feel. They're 14-2. Kevin, the Detroit Lions 14-2. Come on, this is impossible. But I feel like being at home, having that crowd Sunday night that's going to be absolutely explosive is going to will them to this opportunity to win. They beat Minnesota already once this year, so they know they can do it. And I think the offense will be too much for Minnesota to overcome. And then we'll see from there. But right now, I like their chances, but not going to be easy.
You can stay up to date all year on the Detroit Lions by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lions on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Giants may not have totally messed up everything as some are supposing. Before we get to why, age is just a number for LeBron. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending. It helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions or spending habits or even the goals you want to hit this year. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. LeBron James turned 40 on Monday and waxed poetic about the future.
Yeah. I mean, I had a decade of the 30s. So, to just wake up and just be like, oh, man, you're 40? It's kind of laughable, really, to know where I am, to see where I am still, playing the game at a high level, still being such a young man, but old in the scheme of how many years I got in this profession. But it's, just think back to when I came into the league, obviously that's like the first thing I thought about. Like, you came in as an 18-year-old kid, and now you're sitting here as a 40-year-old. 22-year-old vet, with a 20-year-old and the NBA as well. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. It won't be because I can't play this game at a high level. It won't be because of that. Because, to be honest, if I really wanted to, I could probably play this game at a high level for about another, weird that I might say, about another 5 to 7 years if I wanted to. But I'm not going to do that.
The New York Jets are looking at a hard reset this offseason, but one of their head coaching targets would be a rerun. Rex Ryan said Monday on ESPN Radio in New York that he expects to interview for the job. It's believed that Ron Rivera will also be interviewed, but it's odd that the Jets would bring in a former coaches. They're looking to start over in a manner of speaking. They're looking for a new head coach and a new general manager. Questions also remain on if Aaron Rodgers will be quarterbacking in East Rutherford or if a new signal caller will be under center. One thing's for certain, Rex Ryan would be an interesting choice to usher in a new era. Ohio State freshman wideout Jeremiah Smith called out the Oregon defense on Monday. Smith said, "So I'm just letting everybody know right now that if you play man Wednesday, we're taking a shot." Smith had 9 catches for 100 yards in Ohio State's loss earlier this season to Oregon. Locked On Buckeyes host Jay Stevens sees Smith's chances of breaking out in the Rose Bowl.
One thing I said a lot when Ezekiel Elliott was at Ohio State was feed Zeke. You saw him all the time, get that spoon out. Hey, saying, feed me, feed me. And I love when he do that because you could tell he was just in the zone. And that's one thing I think about when I think about Jeremiah Smith in this game in the Rose Bowl. And I hope at some point during this game, we get a flashback to Ezekiel Elliott. Not that Jeremiah Smith is going to play a running back like Zeke, but Jeremiah Smith just goes out there and he starts cooking, starts feeling it. Hey, man, feed me. feed me. Just give me the rock, feed me, because you need to have him. You want him to have that kind of mindset.
The New York Giants picked up a monumental win against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 17, maybe even a franchise-changing one. Here to talk about that with me is Patricia Traina, the host of Locked On Giants. And Patricia, I'm not sure anybody saw the game against the Colts going the way it did for the Giants, but Drew Lock comes in and just absolutely dominates, and the Giants win. But when you're talking about draft positioning, that's going to have a whole lot of implications for this franchise moving forward. How monumental or how franchise changing is this win when you look at the Giants, who are well positioned? They're still going to have a top draft pick, but it might not be the highest they could have gotten, especially if they were able to lose this game in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody had on their bingo card that the Giants were going to get into a scoring shootout with the Colts and come out on top. That's for sure. But, you know, the Giants going into the game, obviously they had the first overall pick. All they had to do was keep losing. But, you know, I've told Giant fans over and over that the team isn't interested in tanking. They didn't tank. We saw it yesterday. So now what this does, in addition to dropping them down to fourth, and I think they've got a smaller chance now of reclaiming that first overall pick, is it changes kind of their strategy a little bit. And that if you're drafting first overall, obviously you could have your pick of the litter. You could take a quarterback, you could take Travis Hunter, you could take whatever player you want because you don't have to compete with anybody. You could also trade down and get yourself a nice little haul. So if you decide in the offseason, well, you know, we don't really like any of these quarterbacks, so we're going to sign a bridge guy instead. You can trade that pick, trade down with that pick, and you can get more draft picks that if you like the class next year, now you've got a little bit more ammunition to trade up. Now, obviously, Giant fans, they want a quarterback. You know, they're tired of subpar quarterback play. I think we all are. The fan base seems split. It seems more in favor of Shedeur Sanders than it does Cam Ward. But by dropping, you know, the Giants now, they're in a position. I think the Patriots are currently sitting first. The Patriots probably don't need a quarterback. So now they're in the driver's seat. And who knows? Will the Giants have to trade up with the Patriots to get that quarterback after trying to do so last year?
And you mentioned it, Patricia, the players on the field are never going to tank. You can't ask guys to go out on the field and say, hey, we really want to lose this game for draft position. It's just not going to happen. The guys who do competitive, they're playing for their careers and what's going on for them. That's not going to be a thing. But in your mind, were you pro winning, pro tanking? What was your stance on the whole situation? Because we know the players aren't going to do it, but do you think maybe the Giants could have sat guys out? What was your thought on the approach the Giants took here?
I mean, having played competitive sports, I don't personally believe in tanking. That said, you know, obviously I could see a case for it. I could see a case against it. I am not surprised that the Giants did not purposely hold guys out. Quite honestly, who are they going to hold out? It's not like they're playing their stars anyway because they don't have stars. They're all injured. So who else are they going to hold out at this point? You know, they're basically down to third and fourth stringers playing the game. So that doesn't really surprise me. Plus, you look at John Mara, one of the co-owners, having endured embarrassing loss after embarrassing loss, it eats at him. And from what I've been able to gather, the organization is not a happy place on a Monday after an embarrassing loss. Brian Dable is a competitor, not willing to pull stunts to purposely lose. So, you know, I'm not surprised that they didn't tank. But again, who were they going to sit down? They're down to their third string and fourth string guys at some positions. You know, you could say, well, you know, maybe they sit down Malik Neighbors. Well, Malik Neighbors was chasing some personal season highs. You could say sit down Brian Burns, who's been banged up. Burns doesn't want to come off the field. It's all about, you know, having pride in the job. And these guys have pride in the job. Even though the season is a lost cause, they want to be out there, you know, contributing to the ultimate goal.
Now, you mentioned Brian Daboll, Patricia, and I think it's a very interesting conversation with what his future holds with the Giants. I know there are some people, you mentioned the competitive spirit, they would like to see that back. And maybe with a quarterback in place for next season, if that's the route the Giants go, that could be an opportunity for Brian Daboll. There's the other side of that coin, though, which is the Giants haven't had a lot of success record-wise. Part of that has to do with the roster. Part of that has to do with the coaching and everything. Do you think Brian Daboll has done enough, Patricia, to earn another year with the Giants moving forward, or do you think it's time for them to make a change?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think maybe what they're going to look at is they're going to look at his Coach of the Year campaign in 2022. But that being said, that'll only take you so far. That was now going to be, they're now going to be, 2 years removed from that? So you can't keep clinging to that. That's like saying, oh, we're going to cling to the 2011 Super Bowl because, everything was all right and well in the world of the Giants. I think Daboll is on shakier ground than Joe Schoen. I believe Joe Schoen will probably survive. They are not a package deal. Daboll, I would say this win that he had against the Colts, even though the Colts did not play very well. Somebody asked me how many missed tackles did the Colts have. Pro Football Focus had them with 10 missed tackles. And, of course, the Giants also won the turnover battle. So you're not going to win games if you're losing the turnover battle and you're missing tackles. But that said, I think the win might have helped Brian Daboll a little bit. But what it's all going to boil down to is what is he going to outline as being his plan to fix this team moving forward? The quarterback is part of it. Is he going to continue to call the plays, which really hasn't worked out this year? Is he going to adjust how he doles out preseason snaps, which hasn't worked in 2 years? What's going to change? And those answers, depending on what Brian Daboll tells the ownership duo of John Mara and Steve Tisch, that's going to determine whether he's back or not.
You can stay up to date all year on the New York Giants by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Giants on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Penn State needs to show everyone just how much better they are than Boise State. Penn State rolled through their first round matchup in the college football playoff, but now they face the man who was the Heisman runner-up in Ashton Jeanty and Boise State. Locked On Nittany Lions host Zach Sako explains why Penn State just needs to show everyone why they're the better team.
Penn State beats Boise State 38-20. 38-20 is my final score prediction. And let me tell you why Penn State wins here. Penn State is just overall the better team. They're the more athletic team. They have been the more battle-tested team. I mean, truly, this team is bigger and faster. For Penn State, between Abdul Carter, Zane Durant, Nicholas Singleton, right? All these guys up and down the lineup that are just overly athletic, overly talented, NFL ready. These guys are prepared to go off to the pros. Boise State does not have that. You will notice the difference in size between Penn State's roster and Boise State's roster. Yes, Boise State is going to be a physical team in this game. We will see that, but Penn State just outmatches them when it comes to actual strength on strength, the actual tangible strength on strength. Let's talk about the level of competition here. Penn State has been battle tested. Now, everyone's going to argue, most people are going to argue, well, Penn State didn't play the toughest teams in the Big Ten. Boise State played a Mountain West Conference schedule. I know they played Oregon close. I know that was only a 3-point game. But aside from a couple other Power 4 teams, Boise State played a Mountain West Conference schedule, so they weren't routinely tested throughout the season. Toughest other team that they faced was UNLV, and they won decisively, right? But week in and week out, after Penn State got past Bowling Green and Kent State, these were legitimate teams in the Big Ten that you still had to go up against. So the level of competition that Penn State had to face has prepared them for this moment, facing an Ohio State, a better version of Oregon. I don't think that was the best version of Oregon that Boise State had played early in the season. Penn State got the best version of that Oregon team, and it certainly showed. Now, from Penn State's specific point of view, actually talking about the Nittany Lions' strengths in itself, Penn State's ground game is peaking at the right time. Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton are as close to healthy as possible, and that couldn't be better news for the Nittany Lions going into the postseason. And the offensive line gelling together. I mean, this was a group that between them and the linebackers, I did not know in the preseason which one would be a bigger liability. And now we're seeing both week by week are getting better, but the offensive line truly taking that big step forward against Oregon. That's an Oregon front seven that has gotten better over the course of the season, that is proving to be one of the better units in the country. And Penn State's offensive line had its best performance out of the entire season in the Big Ten championship against probably the second best front four, second best defensive line that they had faced all season in comparison to Ohio State. So for Drew Shelton and then Nolan Rucci to play, not be a liability, but be an asset, be the best graded offensive lineman from the first round of the college football playoff. Penn State's offensive line could not be in better standing. And you're going up against a Boise State front four and a front half of a defense that is formidable. But Penn State, I think, has a slight advantage here because of what they're able to do.
Don't tell Cam Scatteraboo that he's facing the number one defense in the country as Arizona State is set to face Texas in the college football playoff. They continue to keep saying that people are going to try to stop me. Scatteraboo said, there's nobody out there that can stop me. We played in 13 games, and I've been the target on each one, so I'm not too worried. We're going to play our game and play ball and see what happens there. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Ducks or the Buckeyes make it to the college football playoff semifinal? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.